one of the world's most courageous military commanders, widely recognized as the most powerful king in Europe. Was Napoleon Bonaparte. However, he remains one of history's most controversial figures, with some praising his capabilities, while others criticize his hunger for power. Questions about the immense loss of life attributed to him persist. What is the truth? Was he a hero of the masses or the vilest of villains? Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15, 1769 in Ajaccio, on the Mediterranean island of Corsica. He was the second of 8 surviving children born to Carlo Bonaparte, 1746-1785, a lawyer, and Letizia Romolino Bonaparte, 1750-1836. Although his parents were members of the minor Corsican nobility, the family was not wealthy. The year before Napoleon's birth, France acquired Corsica from the city-state of Genoa, Italy. Napoleon later adopted a French spelling of his last name. As a boy, Napoleon attended school in mainland France, where he learned the French language and went on to graduate from a French military academy in 1785. He then became a second lieutenant in an artillery regiment of the French army. The French Revolution began in 1789, and within 3 years, revolutionaries had overthrown the monarchy and proclaimed a French republic. During the early years of the revolution, Napoleon was largely on leave from the military and home in Corsica, where he became affiliated with the Jacobins, a pro-democracy political group. In 1793, following a clash with the nationalist Corsican governor, Pasquale Paoli, 1725-1807, the Bonaparte family fled their native island for mainland France, where Napoleon returned to military duty. In France, Napoleon became associated with Augustin Robespierre, 1763-1794, the brother of revolutionary leader Maximilien Robespierre, 1758-1794, a Jacobin who was a key force behind the Reign of Terror, 1793-1794, a period of violence against enemies of the revolution. During this time, Napoleon was promoted to the rank of brigadier general in the army. However, after Robespierre fell from power and was guillotined along with Augustin in July 1794, Napoleon was briefly put under house arrest for his ties to the brothers. In 1795, Napoleon helped suppress a royalist insurrection against the revolutionary government in Paris and was promoted to Major General. Since 1792, France's revolutionary government had been engaged in military conflicts with various European nations. In 1796, Napoleon commanded a French army that defeated the larger armies of Austria, one of his country's primary rivals, in a series of battles in Italy. In 1797, France and Austria signed the Treaty of Campo Formio, resulting in territorial gains for the French. The following year, the Directory, the 5-person group that had governed France since 1795, offered to let Napoleon lead an invasion of England. Napoleon determined that France's naval forces were not yet ready to go up against the superior British Royal Navy. Instead, he proposed an invasion of Egypt in an effort to wipe out British trade routes with India. Napoleon's troops scored a victory against Egypt's military rulers, the Mamluks, at the Battle of the Pyramids in July 1798. Soon, however, his forces were stranded after his naval fleet was nearly decimated by the British at the Battle of the Nile in August 1798. In early 1799, Napoleon's army launched an invasion of Ottoman Empire-ruled Syria, which ended with a failed siege of Acre, located in modern-day Israel. That summer, with the political situation in France marked by uncertainty, the ever-ambitious and cunning Napoleon opted to abandon his army in Egypt and return to France. In 1796, Napoleon married Josephine de Beauharnais, 1763-1814, a stylish widow 6 years his senior who had 2 teenage children. More than a decade later, in 1809, after Napoleon had no offspring of his own with Empress Josephine, he had their marriage annulled so he could find a new wife and produce an heir. In 1810, he wed Marie-Louise, 1791-1847, the daughter of the Emperor of Austria. The following year, she gave birth to their son, Napoleon François Joseph Charles Bonaparte, 1811-1832, who became known as Napoleon II and was given the title King of Rome. In addition to his son with Marie-Louise, Napoleon had several illegitimate children. In November 1799, in an event known as the coup of 18 Brumaire, Napoleon was part of a group that successfully overthrew the French Directory. The Directory was replaced with a 3-member consulate, and 5-7. Napoleon became first consul, making him France's leading political figure. In June 1800, at the Battle of Marengo, Napoleon's forces defeated one of France's perennial enemies, the Austrians, and drove them out of Italy. The victory helped cement Napoleon's power as first consul. Additionally, with the Treaty of Amiens in 1802, the war-weary British agreed to peace with the French, although the peace would only last for a year. Napoleon worked to restore stability to post-revolutionary France. He centralized the government, instituted reforms in such areas as banking and education, supported science and the arts, and sought to improve relations between his regime and the Pope, who represented France's main religion, Catholicism, which had suffered during the Revolution. One of his most significant accomplishments was the Napoleonic Code, which streamlined the French legal system and continues to form the foundation of French civil law to this day. In 1802, a constitutional amendment made Napoleon first consul for life. 2 years later, in 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of France in a lavish ceremony at the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. From 1803 to 1815, France was engaged in the Napoleonic Wars, a series of major conflicts with various coalitions of European nations. In 1803, partly as a means to raise funds for future wars, Napoleon sold France's Louisiana territory in North America to the newly independent United States for $15 million, a transaction that later became known as the Louisiana Purchase. In October 1805, the British wiped out Napoleon's fleet at the Battle of Trafalgar. However, in December of that same year, Napoleon achieved what is considered to be one of his greatest victories at the Battle of Austerlitz, in which his army defeated the Austrians and Russians. The victory resulted in the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire and the creation of the Confederation of the Rhine. Beginning in 1806, Napoleon sought to wage large-scale economic warfare against Britain with the establishment of the so-called continental system of European port blockades against British trade. In 1807, following Napoleon's defeat of the Russians at Friedland in Prussia, Alexander I, 1777-1825, was forced to sign a peace settlement, the Treaty of Tilsit. In 1809, the French defeated the Austrians at the Battle of Wagram, resulting in further gains for Napoleon. During these years, Napoleon re-established a French aristocracy, eliminated in the French Revolution, and began handing out titles of nobility to his loyal friends and family, as his empire continued to expand across much of Western and Central continental Europe. In 1810, Russia broke away from the continental system, prompting Napoleon to launch a massive invasion of Russia in the summer of 1812. The Russian strategy of retreat rather than direct confrontation led to Napoleon's troops advancing deeper into Russian territory, despite their lack of preparation for a prolonged campaign. The Battle of Borodino in September resulted in heavy casualties for both sides, but Napoleon's forces continued their march towards Moscow, only to find the city nearly deserted. The retreating Russians set fire to Moscow, depriving Napoleon's army of vital supplies. After waiting in vain for a surrender, Napoleon, facing the harsh Russian winter, reluctantly ordered his starving and exhausted army to retreat. The retreat turned disastrous as the Russian army relentlessly harassed Napoleon's troops. Out of the initial 600,000 troops, only around 100,000 survived the ordeal. Meanwhile, French forces were also embroiled in the Peninsular War, 1808-1814, where they faced defeat at the hands of the Spanish, Portuguese, and British. The Battle of Leipzig in 1813, known as the Battle of Nations, saw Napoleon's forces suffer defeat against a coalition comprising Austrian, Prussian, Russian, and Swedish troops. Napoleon retreated to France, and by March 1814, Paris fell to coalition forces. On April 6, 1814, Napoleon, then in his mid-40s, was compelled to abdicate the throne. Under the Treaty of Fontainebleau, he was exiled to Elba, a Mediterranean island near Italy, where he was granted sovereignty over the island while his wife and son resided in Austria. On February 26, 1815, after less than a year in exile, Napoleon escaped Elba and sailed to the French mainland with a group of more than 1,000 supporters. On March 20th, he returned to Paris, where he was welcomed by cheering crowds. The new king, Louis XVI, 1755-1824, fled, and Napoleon began what came to be known as his 100 Days campaign. Upon Napoleon's return to France, a coalition of allies, the Austrians, British, Prussians and Russians, who considered the French emperor an enemy, began to prepare for war. Napoleon raised a new army and planned to strike preemptively, defeating the Allied forces one by one before they could launch a united attack against him. In June 1815, his forces invaded Belgium, where British and Prussian troops were stationed. On June 16th, Napoleon's troops defeated the Prussians at the Battle of Ligny. However, 2 days later, on June 18th, at the Battle of Waterloo near Brussels, the French were crushed by the British with assistance from the Prussians. On June 22, 1815, Napoleon was once again forced to abdicate. A tiny island measuring only about 10 by 5 miles, its jagged cliffs must have seemed a grim sight when the former emperor first laid eyes on it. After initially enjoying 2 pleasant months living at the home of a former friend, William Balcombe, Napoleon was then moved to nearby Longwood House, a property that had fallen into disrepair and which was particularly damp and riddled with mould. His servants were said to have complained of colds, catarrhs, damp floors and poor provisions. One of the entourage of 28 people who accompanied Napoleon was the Comte de la Casses, who described Longwood House as a wretched hovel a few feet square. It would only get worse. The new British governor of the island, Hudson Lowe, was determined that Napoleon would not escape from this exile as he had done from his first one in Elba, and so restricted his movement, monitoring his correspondence, and ordering that Napoleon be seen in the flesh by British officers several times a day. This led to the ex-emperor going into a bizarre form of rebellion, closing the shutters of the house and carving tiny peepholes into them so that he could look out without being seen. He also took up a few pastimes. He dictated his memoirs, wrote a book on Julius Caesar, studied English, and played cards. In fact, he played cards so much that a range of versions of solitaire, the card game also known as patience, have been named after him. Eventually, the living conditions, and especially his lack of exercise, began to take their toll, and Napoleon's health began to decline precipitously. He suffered from abdominal pain, constipation, vomiting, and overall weakness. By February 1821, about 4 years after his arrival on Saint Helena, Napoleon knew his end was nigh. He reconciled with the Catholic Church after a most tumultuous relationship, which had included at one point kidnapping the Pope, and made his confession and took the final sacraments. On May 5, 1821, he passed away at age 51. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Your engagement helps us grow and continue creating quality videos for you. See you in the next one.